Welcome to EJH British Cars. Today we're going to start working on the top cover for the TR2 transmission. As you recall, this is actually a TR4A transmission, which puts it about 1966. So it's about 10 years newer than the car. And we're going to take it apart, replace the seals, make sure everything's good in it. And when I started the video, I wasn't sure whether I was going to continue using the 4A cover or to modify or swap over the original TR2 top cover. What we wound up doing is using the TR2 cover, but it also meant I had to swap the mechanicals from the 4 cover to the 2 cover because they are different, and we'll go over that in the video. So anyway, let's get started.
Here's the underside of the top cover as it came off the transmission. These are the shift forks, and you can see it's a 3-rail type of transmission. This is the normal way for a TR transmission, and we've cleaned it up a little bit. These are the shift forks, and you want to make sure that the pads are still beefy on these. These ones are a little worn, but they're not bad, so we're going to reuse those. They do not seem to be available out on for new parts. Well, I did find one that they wanted like $200 a piece for them, so I suppose if you had nothing, you'd have to do that. But I can't see any reason not to reuse these ones. So this is going to have to come apart, which means we're going to have to take out the square drive pins, which are holding the forks, and then we'll pull the shift rods back through. This is also an overdrive top cover. These are the 2 overdrive switches which stop the overdrive from engaging in first gear and reverse. This is also the bung is there to be machined to put a dipstick in, but these later transmissions never use that. So let's go ahead and take one of these out. And that's just a plug. And then there's a spring and a ball in here, a ball bearing. So there's the spring. So I've taken all 3 of the plungers apart. And these are the parts here, but this must be the second plunger has a ball, but the 3, 4, and the reverse have these tapered pins in them. So you want to mix that stuff up. Also notice that those plugs don't really go down against the stop, they just go against the spring pressure. So I'm surprised that they haven't walked themselves out, but they didn't. But it also means you can adjust how much tension is on those detents to compensate for spring wear and everything else. I'll probably put a little Loctite in there so that they got more than just the tension from the spring holding them together. I've also removed this set screws out of the reverse lever and the 3 main, or 3, 4, and I can't get at this one yet. So I'm going to take this center one out to give me some more room. If you look, this head of this screw is much closer to the forks than these ones are. You can see that. And this one puts the white out in the open. So these 2 are pretty easy to get, but I can't get the socket on there square enough. I thought I might try the open end wrench, so these things are in there super tight. I was really surprised. Anyway, so I should be able to pull this center shift lever out now. I just have to get against the safeties. Alright, well, we've centered these up again. And then this is the reverse. So there's a spacer here. And then the shaft comes out. This is the reverse fork. So there's the shaft. These are the detents for neutral and engage. This is the reverse fork, so it only has one direction to travel. I think you have to find that the other forks will have 3 notches, reverse or neutral, and then like 1 and 2 or 3 and 4. And this is the hole that this pin was in with the shift fork. I took these two small bolts, 7/16 heads, off of this plate, and if you lift that plate up, you'll see the 3 O-rings in there that seal that shaft. So this is why we came in here. I want to replace these. So I expect these are just a standard O-ring, and I'm hopefully some new ones came in the kit. Also, off of the shaft, but you definitely want to soak these things for a while because they are super tight and you do not want to break it off. Oh, you might even wind up using a bit of heat on that. Anyway, I'm going to go look at my O-ring kit, see if I got the O-rings, and we'll put that in. Okay, so I got the pin out. If you look, I actually did a review on the little socket I used. It was really impressive. $2.24 from Amazon, free shipping, and it solved this problem. I mean, I was stuck. I really was. Anyway, so I pulled that out. I've pulled the that shaft out. That's the first, second shaft. And then this shaft is the third, fourth. Also note that there are ball bearings and a little bar that goes in between that works with this detent, which is to stop you from being able to put 2 gears engaged at the same time. So you want to be careful that you don't lose those bits. I'm hoping the ball bearings have come out already, and I expect that the sliding bar is still in this shifter rod. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that out here in a second. All right, let's see if we can get this one out. I also removed the, there's 2 screws that hold that plate. That's the retainer plate for the O-rings. Well, there's that other hole, and that piece isn't there either. So it might just be the ball bearings that are sitting against that. I don't know. We'll play with it a bit as we get further along. Anyway, here are the 3 O-rings, and they're just a standard O-ring. I found replacements. They're right in. This is I think this is from Jegs, but it's just a standard size O-ring. This one here looks like an R09, and these things will come just right out of here. You just need a little something to get behind them. This is supposed to be a scratch aw, but there's nothing special about it. You could use a small screwdriver or a little piece of wire, almost anything. And like that. And there you go. So you want to make sure you don't mix these pieces up too. I think these spaces are different from one to another. As I've been pulling them out, I've just putting a zip tie through them, tying them to the shift fork, just so I don't intermingle them. And here's the shift fork. There's the pads. You can see these are bronze, by the way. You can see there's a little bit of wear, but nothing too bad. This one's worn a bit here. You can see it was just... Okay. So to the overly attentive of you, you will notice that this is a different top cover. This is the original TR2 top cover with the oil dipstick hole. And this is the oil dipstick with just a couple of marks here on the bottom. And there were a couple of other small changes. So much as the forks look the same, they are not. If you recall, this one, that hole is much closer to here, which this one is not. They do not have the spacer bars on them, and there's an extra hole here on the end, and they get this little screw. And that apparently is saves the same function as the spacer to stop you from pushing the shifter too far. So we're getting ready to put it back together. We'll put 3 new O-rings in here. Just take that plate off and pop in and out, no problem. We've pre-lubricated them. This is the center rod, and I started. So don't forget to put this little dowel back in. Otherwise, that's the lockout, part of the lockout mechanism, which stops it from going into 2 gears at once. And then we need to put the fork on the end. So I just need to go grab that. So on this one, the spacer goes on first. Then the shift fork. And you can see that goes with the boss facing in. And then we put a new taper pin. Now this one's the buggered up one. I got some new ones here, so it's going to go grab that. This is one of the other differences in the TR2 cover. These pins had a hole drilled through the top and they were wired in, whereas this one, see, it's got a little bit of expansion plastic material in there. So we don't even need to Loctite it. Just get that in there and started. So I've put this on its side. That's going to go into a hole there. So I'm going to put my finger on the other side of the exit hole because this might just roll by. It doesn't sound like it did. So hopefully that will go in. So then another shift lever. Oh, this is loose, so I'm going to go. I don't know if you can see that, but it's moving around on the shaft, so I'm going to take a look at that. Hang on. Okay, so I got the reverse rod in. This end cap, the one that I was using, was worn, and it was jiggling like this. I had another bar, so I've used that. This is the orientation. This is the one with the really tight bolt. I haven't put the bolts in yet. This is the other one. So you see they're flipping around there. And then this is the reverse gear. And as being a TR4A transmission, this goes over here. So I was looking. This is the reversing lever for a non-synchronous transmission. You'll see it's a completely different device and it lines up differently. So if you're putting your top cover over onto a newer transmission, you need to swap these rods around with the ones you got. Now they all went right in here. They all fit because the top cover, I think, is basically just the same part. That the only difference is whether they've drilled this hole out and, of course, whether they've driven the overdrive. This one's got 2 plugs in where the overdrive switches go, and I'll switch them over later. So the lockouts were a little fussier than I thought. So off camera, I took it apart because I had dropped a ball down into this cavity. So I got that back out. I put it in, put the ball in, make sure that this was in the right spot so that it would sink into it, and then put this in. And you got to get these alignments super tight. So I had this flipped over the other way and put the third ball into the hole and jiggled these around until it finally fell down and in. And then I could push this bar in. So it's fussy, it's not difficult. You can get a little bit of a hint because if you shine a light down here, you can actually see the alignment notches on the shifters. So that's helpful too. But to get it perfectly aligned, you're going to have to, I had a screwdriver in there on top of the ball and pushing down and jiggled it around until I felt it click down, and then the other bar go in quite easily. So it says right in the manual, if they're not going easy, you got something wrong, and if you try to force it, severe damage will occur, quote unquote. So anyway, I got all these in now. So you're better off to leave all this loose until you get everything lined up. Make sure you clean everything well. It's interesting. I was talking to a gentleman that does transmission work at Triumph Fest the other night. I was sitting next to him at the table, and he mentioned this hole. And what he said was, if you're seeing little drips on the back of your transmission, and this is the 3rd or 4th 3/4 rod, it's because this hole carries a bit of oil out when you're in all the way, so it can drip a little out. I guess it's the other ones don't seem to have it. The only thing I think it's there to lubricate the O-rings a little bit. So I don't know. You know, they don't do anything on a car for no reason whatsoever. So I've left it. I've never really noticed oil leaking enough to worry about it. He suggested taking a piece of baling wire or something and drive it into the hole, cutting it off smooth. But I don't think I'll do that. You know, everybody's got a different opinion. I'm not saying his is wrong. I'm just saying the little bit of oil that would seep out with that is so minute, I'm just not worried about it. Anyway, so this is basically assembled now. Do need to put the stops in here and tighten all this up. So these stops, early cars use a wedge on reverse and 2 ball bearings here, and later cars use a wedge at a wedge and a ball bearing on 1, 2, I think. I'll have to go look at my book again. There's a note to the dealers, and they talk about the transmissions floating out of 2nd gear, I think it was, and what they suggested was to put one of the wedge ends in. These are the so they're kind of like a bullet. So the factory notice, they're supposed to retrofit these into all the earlier cars. And I've had a car that did that, and changing it over solved all that. So it's just that the ball being round just came out a little too easy. When it would come out of gear when there was no load. So like you were cresting a short rise in 2nd gear, not really, and your motor's just not pulling, not pushing, so there's no stress in the drivetrain, and it's really easy for the shifter to walk out. Anyway, so we'll get those done. I'll go look in a book and see which one goes where. Plungers go into reverse and 1st, 2nd, and these are the ones that are in the 4A. They're hollow and use a slightly smaller diameter spring. Then they get a distance piece, which is just a plug. There's the other one. And then in this one, it just gets a ball. So that goes in there. It gets the bigger diameter spring. And then we put in these 3 plugs. And of course, they're actually adjustable. So if you're having shifts that are too tight or too notchy or not notchy enough, easy enough to do. And they get trapped in by the gasket. So, you know, that's okay. But I like to put a little Loctite on them, like everything else, just because, you know, they could walk around a little bit. So it doesn't take very much. Just put a drop on and then into the hole. And when I took them apart, they were about 2 turns down, which seems like as good a spot as any. There's that one. I actually saw the bottoms out there, so that's probably what they're supposed to do. I've pulled them out of transmissions where they were, you know, they'd backed out flush with the gasket. You know, I don't know. That me, I personally like a notchy shifter. It doesn't have to shift like it's butter. But when the wife drives, she loves the transmissions that feel like that. So do it to however you feel is correct. So I'm going to run them down so they touch. That's about how they looked when I took it apart, because there's no guarantee that it wasn't took apart and put back together again at some other time. More than likely was the case, to be honest. You know, you start working, this is the top cover off the original car, so it is 68 years old, so God only knows what's happened to it over the years. So, those are done. I need to put the screws in and then just snug them down. I showed you that earlier, so that's no big news. And that should do it for this top cover. Oh, I will also take these two plugs out. I'll take the overdrive switches out. Try not to disturb with their settings, put them in, but I will check to make sure that they are operating fully. I mean, all right, we're going to transfer the switches over, and I use the shims that they came with. So this is the 3/4 shift, and it's in fourth now. You can see that's at 0. There's neutral, no connection. There's 3. There's neutral again, and then if we put this on the one that's in 1 and 2, if I go to 1, nothing. Neutral, nothing. Second gear, there it is. And you can see that that's where it turned on, and the shifter came back another ½ inch or more, so that that ball is engaging readily. So that's good. So these both had 2 shims, which is what was under the other cover, and of course it's got the same, they're being tripped by the exact same mechanicals that are in the same color. All we've really done is swap the aluminum case, and all the guts came off the other transmission. So they seem to be fine. These tabs were bent. Anyway, I used a small pair of pliers and grabbed them and actually rotated it. So don't just lift up with a screwdriver or something, because it's really easy to break these things right here, and these switches are fairly expensive. Anyway, so I think that's it. That goes there. So I'm going to look. This seems to have a piece of felt right here. Whether you can get a new one or not, I don't know. So that's the top cover done. Hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. And we will see you on the next one.